Ryan sat in his room, the air thick with tension. The walls, once his sanctuary, felt like they were closing in. Outside the door, he heard the heavy footsteps, Daniel's footsteps. His fingers gripped the phone tightly, the screen still showing the last message from his grandma. No matter where you are always my boy. Stay strong, mi amor. A sudden, sharp knock. Ryan opened the door. Daniel's voice, deep and cold, made his stomach knot. Ryan didn't move. His pulse pounded in his ears. The door handle twisted, locked. A frustrated sigh from outside. Don't make this difficult. Your mother and I do everything for you. A burn rose in Ryan's chest. Everything. They had ripped him from the only person who truly loved him, Grandma Sofia. 9 years of happiness in Buenos Aires, gone in a blink. Now he was trapped here, in this perfect suburban nightmare with a mother he barely knew and a man who made his skin crawl. The suitcase that had carried him here felt heavier than it should have, probably because it held his whole life. He could still see his grandma's eyes glistening as she held his face, her voice soft but breaking. I wish you didn't have to go, mi cielo, but your mother says, it's time. Her hands had trembled, and he felt her sadness, like she was losing a part of herself. He had wanted to scream, to refuse. Why now? His mother hadn't been there for 15 years. She had a new life, a life he didn't belong to. But they said he had no choice. Family should be together, they told him. But was this a family? A metallic click snapped him back to the present. His heart jumped. Daniel had the key. The door opened, and Daniel stepped inside, towering, polished, and perfect on the outside. But his eyes, cold, calculating. His smile was a mask. Ignoring me now? I thought we were past that. Ryan clenched his fists. We? There was no we. There was him, the warden, and Ryan, the prisoner. You want to know why I ignore you? Ryan snapped, the dam inside him bursting. Because you're not my father. You'll never be. You can take my phone, lock me up, but you'll never make me love you. A flicker of something dark flashed in Daniel's eyes, but his voice stayed calm, too calm. You're right, he said, stepping closer. I'm not your father. I'm something worse. Ryan's throat went dry. Daniel lowered his voice, his smile twisting into something sinister. But I own your life now, and the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. Ryan's chest heaved, rage and confusion colliding. Why do you even care? I'm nothing to you. Daniel's reply was soft, but it hit like a hammer. Oh, Ryan, you'll understand soon enough. That night, Ryan lay awake, his heart pounding. He made a promise to himself. I will uncover the truth. I will find my way back to the only real family I ever had, no matter the cost. But what he didn't know was that the truth waiting for him was far darker than he could ever imagine. If you felt the tension, the fear, and the fight, this is just the beginning. The secrets, the lies, and the betrayals are only starting to unfold. Like, share, and subscribe to follow this chilling journey. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters live inside our homes. The night after Ryan's confrontation with Daniel, sleep was a distant dream. He lay awake, Daniel's words replaying in his head. You'll understand soon enough. Understand what? What was he hiding? Why did his mother suddenly decide to reclaim him after 15 years of silence? The answers, he felt, were buried in the past she had kept locked away. He remembered 9 years ago, in Buenos Aires. He was 6 when he first asked his grandmother about his mother. Abuela. He tugged on her sleeve. Why doesn't Mama live with us? Her hands paused from kneading dough. For a moment, the warmth in her eyes dimmed. She wiped her hands on her apron and pulled him into her lap. Your mother, she loves you. But she had dreams to chase. Mi cielo. She wanted a better life, for you. He nodded, though the words felt hollow. A better life? Without him in it? Yet, he never doubted Grandma's love. She was his world, his protector. His home. Years passed, and his mother remained a shadow. She sent birthday cards, money, and sometimes gifts, but never herself. He would ask, will she visit this Christmas? The answer was always the same. Not this year, mi amor. Maybe soon? But soon never came. A week after his arrival in Canada, he found something, a small, old envelope buried inside one of his suitcases. It smelled faintly of lavender, like Grandma's room. The handwriting was hers. He opened it with trembling fingers. My dearest Ryan, I fought for you more than you'll ever know. Your mother, she has her reasons. But promise me, mi niño, never let anyone make you feel unwanted. If you need me, find me. I will always be here. A cold wave of confusion hit him. Fought for him? Reasons? Why would Grandma need to fight for him against his own mother? That night, the questions boiled over. He stormed into the living room where his mother, Emily, was sipping wine, her eyes on the television but her mind somewhere far away. Why? He demanded, his voice sharp. Why did Grandma say she fought for me? What aren't you telling me? Emily froze. The glass trembled in her hand. Slowly, she placed it down and turned to him, her face carefully blank. Ryan, it's complicated. He laughed bitterly. Complicated? You left me for 15 years. What's complicated about that? Her lips pressed into a thin line. You think it was easy? You think I didn't want to take you with me? Then why didn't you? He shot back, his voice cracking. For a moment, something raw flashed in her eyes, pain, regret. But then, like a mask snapping into place, she said coldly, because it wasn't safe. Safe? His stomach dropped. Safe from what? Her silence was deafening. She turned away. You're too young to understand. The words echoed in his mind. It wasn't safe. But why wouldn't she tell him what wasn't safe? He knew one thing, she was hiding something, and the only person who might tell him the truth wasn't here. His hands shook as he dialed Grandma Sophia's number, praying she would pick up. But the line rang and rang until a robotic voice answered, "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." A pit formed in his stomach. What the hell is going on? Desperate for answers, he snuck into his mother's study. Filing cabinets, folders, years of legal documents. And then he saw it. A thick file labeled Sofia Castillo, Guardianship Dispute. Heart pounding, he flipped it open. What he read made his blood run cold. 2009, petition for custody filed by Sofia Castillo, denied. 2010, appeal submitted. 2011, court ruling, custody awarded to Emily Harper. Reason, alleged safety concerns involving a third party. 2012, restraining order requested against Sofia Castillo, denied. He stumbled back, his breath shallow. Grandma tried to keep him. Mom fought to take him. And someone dangerous was the reason. The last page, a police report, froze him in place. Incident report, Buenos Aires, 2011. Sofia Castillo reported multiple anonymous threats demanding she relinquish custody of her grandson. Investigation suspended due to lack of evidence. Threats? His grandmother was threatened? By who? He realized he had been asking the wrong question all along. It wasn't, why did my mother leave me behind? It was, who wanted him gone from her life so badly? That they threatened his grandmother to keep him away. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on a house that felt anything but warm. Every corner of this place screamed perfect family. Polished floors, fresh flowers, smiling photos on the mantel, all lies. Emily sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone. Across from her, Daniel read the news, his eyes flicking briefly to Ryan before returning to his screen. The tension from last night's confrontation still hung thick in the air, but they were acting like nothing had happened. "Good morning," Emily said, her voice a little too cheerful. Ryan sat down, his gaze cold. "Morning," he muttered, though it felt like anything but. Daniel folded his newspaper with an exaggerated calm. "I trust you slept well." Ryan. His tone, it was always polished. Polite, but something underneath felt sharp, like a knife hidden in velvet. Ryan pushed his eggs around the plate, appetite gone. His mind was still racing from what he had found in those documents. His grandmother threatened. Custody battles. Restraining orders. His mother lying to his face. And Daniel, his name was everywhere in those legal papers. Not just as Emily's husband, as someone deeply involved. He felt Daniel's eyes on him. "Something on your mind, son?" Ryan's voice shot out cold and sharp. "Don't call me that!" The room froze. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. "Ryan," she warned softly, "be respectful." But Ryan was past respectful. "Why was your name in Grandma's custody case?" He fired at Daniel. Daniel's expression didn't flicker. "Because I helped your mother protect you. Your grandmother didn't understand what was best for you." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Funny," he said coldly, "because she was the only one who ever made me feel safe." Emily's voice was tight. "Ryan, Enough. But Daniel smiled. That cold, knowing smile. Safety. Ryan is about control. And in this house, you will be safe because everything is under control. Over the next few days, Ryan learned exactly what under control meant. His phone, parental locks. His laptop, restricted access. His conversations, monitored. And his freedom, an illusion. Even his walks to school, tracked through a family safety app. It's for your protection, Emily said when he confronted her. This world is dangerous. But it wasn't the world Ryan feared. It was them. One night, while wandering the house, he found something strange, a room with a digital lock. Not a guest room, not a storage space. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. But his gut screamed, there's something inside they don't want him to see. He tried guessing the code. Birthdays, wedding dates, nothing. But before he could try more, what are you doing? Daniel's voice. Behind him, his blood turned to ice. Ryan turned slowly, heart pounding, just exploring. Daniel's smile was thin, his eyes colder than Ryan had ever seen. That room is off limits. Ryan stood his ground. What's in there? Daniel's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Things that aren't your concern. But if you try that again, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The threat hung there, suffocating. That night, Ryan tried calling Grandma Sophia again. Same result, number not in service. In a final act of desperation, he emailed her. But the next morning, the email bounced back. Blocked. His chest tightened. He hadn't blocked her, which meant, you're wasting your time, came a voice from behind. He turned, Daniel, leaning against the doorway, smug and victorious. I told you, Daniel said softly. Everything is under control, including you. Something inside Ryan snapped. Why? He shouted, his voice shaking. Why are you keeping me from her? What are you afraid I'll find out? For the first time, Daniel's mask of calm slipped, and Ryan saw something raw, anger. Because, Daniel growled, Sophia never knew when to let go, and neither do you. Ryan's fists clenched. You don't control me. Daniel's lips curled into a cold smile. That's where you're wrong. Lying in bed that night, Ryan's mind raced. Daniel's words echoed. Sophia never knew when to let go. And then he remembered. His phone's voice recording app was still running from when he tried to record Daniel's threats earlier. Heart pounding, he hit play. Daniel's voice came through the speaker, cold and cutting. Sophia never knew when to let go. She didn't know when to stop digging. She didn't know when to stop fighting for him. There was a pause. A breath. Then, that's why I had to end it. The phone fell from Ryan's hand. He didn't just stop her from contacting him. He did something to her. The recording kept playing, but Ryan couldn't hear it anymore. His heartbeat was too loud, pounding in his ears. That's why I had to end it. Daniel's words felt like a gunshot, cold, final. His fingers trembled as he clutched the phone. What did he mean? Did he? Ryan couldn't finish the thought. His stomach twisted. Did Daniel hurt Grandma Sophia? A scream rose in his throat, but he swallowed it down. He couldn't break, not now, not until he knew the truth. The next morning, he knew what he had to do. Get into the locked room. Whatever Daniel was hiding, it was in there. But breaking into his office wasn't going to be easy. Cameras, motion sensors, and Daniel, always watching. At dinner, Ryan stayed quiet, nodding at everything his mother said. Daniel watched him closely, but he kept his mask on. Then, right on cue, he accidentally spilled his drink all over Daniel's phone and laptop. Oh, shit! I'm so sorry. He jumped up, grabbing napkins. Let me, Daniel's eyes flashed with anger. You idiot! He snatched his drenched phone and stormed out, cursing. Damn it! I need rice. Where's the... Emily rushed to help him. While they were distracted, Ryan slipped from the table and sprinted upstairs. The locked room. He pulled out his phone and tried every guess. Birthdays, anniversaries, nothing. His hands shook, panic rising. Then, a flash of memory, Daniel's company name. He keyed in the initials, DH Law 2020. Beep. Unlocked. The room was a stark office, cold, functional. Shelves lined with legal books and thick folders. A desk with a desktop computer, a safe, and a filing cabinet. Ryan went for the cabinet first. His hands rifled through folders labeled with cold. Legal terms, custody dispute, 2011, guardianship appeal, 2012, and then Castillo, Sophia, termination report. His heart stopped. He pulled it out and flipped it open. Subject, Sophia Castillo. Status, terminated. Date, 14 September 2021. Location, Buenos Aires. Cause, incident involving third-party contractor. Client, redacted. Handled by Horizon Security Group, private. His hands shook violently. Terminated didn't mean it couldn't. A cold panic wrapped around his chest. He flipped the page and found something worse. Memo from Horizon Security. Client confirmed target's interference in custody negotiations. Termination approved. Ensure zero loose ends. Child assets secured. Child assets? They meant him. He felt the room spin. His knees hit the floor, but he didn't feel it. Daniel, he ordered this. He made her. Ryan's breath hitched. He couldn't breathe. What do you think you're doing? The voice froze his blood. He turned. Daniel stood in the doorway. His face was stone, but his eyes, cold, murderous. In his hand, Ryan's phone. The screen still glowing. Recording. Well? Daniel said, stepping in, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Looks like the little mouse found the trap. Ryan tried to hide the folder behind him. You did this? His voice was hoarse. You killed her. Daniel's lips curled, but his eyes stayed empty. Killed? Such a nasty word. I solved a problem. She wouldn't let you go. I needed you here. Bile rose in Ryan's throat. Why? He croaked. Why do you need me? Daniel crouched down, leveling his gaze with Ryan's. Because, he whispered, your leverage, your mother. She ran once, but now she stays. Because of you. Ryan felt his world crash. His mother, she stayed not because she loved Daniel, but because she was trapped. Because he was using Ryan. His hands clenched. His voice, shaking with rage. You're a monster. Daniel's smirk sharpened. And what are you going to do about it? Boy? But he made a mistake. In his arrogance, he didn't notice Ryan's phone was still streaming. Leave. Every word. Every confession. Uploaded. To everyone. Ryan launched at him. Caught off guard, Daniel stumbled. Ryan's fist collided with his jaw. He didn't care. Rage, pure, blinding, drove him. But Daniel was bigger, stronger. He grabbed Ryan by the collar and slammed him into the desk. Ryan's head exploded with pain. A sudden, deafening bang. Daniel froze. His body went rigid. His eyes wide with shock, then lifeless. Behind him, Emily. A gun, shaking in her hands. Tears streamed down her face. No more, she whispered. Her voice hollow. No more lies. No more control. Daniel's body hit the floor, and the silence was deafening. The police arrived minutes later, tipped off by the live stream viewers who called emergency services. The whole world had seen it. The truth, raw, brutal, was out. Daniel was dead. But the scars he left, they would never fully heal. And Grandma Sophia, her justice could never be served. In the chaos, the police handed Ryan his phone, still streaming comments. Ryan, we see you. We believe you. You're not alone. Tell your story. The house was a blur of flashing lights and sirens. Daniel's body lay motionless, and Ryan's mother stood frozen, the gun slipping from her trembling hands. Officers swarmed in, shouting commands, but he couldn't hear them. His pulse roared in his ears. Hands grabbed him, pulling him back, but his eyes stayed on her, on his mother, who stared at Daniel like she couldn't believe what she had done. Ryan, a voice barked, but it felt distant, unreal. Someone guided him outside, the cold night air biting against his skin. But nothing could pierce the fog of shock suffocating him. He felt hollow. Hours passed in fragments, questions from the police, flashing cameras from reporters who had seen everything live. Ryan was taken to the station, but he barely spoke. His lips felt like stone. Your mother is in custody, an officer said, his voice cautious, measuring Ryan's reaction. We need your statement. His eyes lifted slowly, and his voice, hoarse but steady, escaped. She was protecting me. But was she? The question seared into his chest. Daniel was dead, but the ghosts he left behind were alive and clawing inside Ryan. His mother pulled the trigger, but was she his savior? Or something else entirely? The interrogation room felt like a cage. A detective sat across from him, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Ryan, we saw the live stream. We know some of the truth, but we need to hear it from you. Ryan's fists clenched on his lap. Daniel killed my grandmother. he rasped, his voice cracking. He threatened us. Ryan stopped, the words catching. And my mother, she shot him to protect me. The detective's brow furrowed. Ryan, there's something you should see. He slid a tablet across the table. Ryan's fingers hesitated before pressing play. It was surveillance footage, but not from tonight. From years ago, a hospital hallway in Buenos Aires. He saw her, his mother, arguing with a man. Not Daniel. Another man. The timestamp, the day before Grandma Sophia's disappearance. Ryan watched, frozen, as the man shoved something into her hand, a thick envelope. She opened it briefly, and he caught the glint of cash. His heart stopped. His mouth went dry. What is this? He barely whispered. The detective's eyes were careful, heavy. It seems your grandmother didn't just disappear. There was a deal, and your mother was part of it. The room closed in on Ryan. The world tilted. His throat burned, but he couldn't scream. No, you're lying. But the video didn't lie. It kept playing. His mother, taking the money. And the man, his face finally clear, an agent from Horizon Security. The same name on the termination report. She knew. She was part of it. The door opened behind him, and a voice, broken, familiar. Ryan, he spun. And there she stood, handcuffed, her face pale, eyes wide with a terror he had never seen. I can explain. Explain? His voice was raw, laced with betrayal. Explain how you sold Grandma? How you... His voice cracked into something shattered. You told me you were protecting me, but you were protecting yourself. Her face twisted with anguish. It wasn't like that. You lied! The walls shook with his scream. You let him kill her? She stepped forward, her voice breaking. I didn't know he would, but you took the money. He spat, his voice hollow. You let them take her from me. She crumbled then, falling to her knees, tears streaming. I was scared. She choked. Daniel was going to take you. He threatened to ruin me, to make me disappear. Sophia! She tried to stop him, and her voice shattered. I thought the money would make them leave her alone. But it didn't. The world fractured. His heart, everything he had believed, was gone. You could have told me, he whispered. You let me hate him. But his voice faltered, breaking under the weight. You let me love a lie? She reached for him, but he stumbled back, his chest heaving, burning. I killed him for you, she whispered, her voice raw and broken. I chose you over him. But his body felt cold. You chose yourself, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And I lost her because of you. The door opened again. Officers stepped in. It's time, one said quietly. She turned back to him, her face shattered, destroyed. Ryan, please, she begged, her voice a whisper of a woman already broken. Please believe me. I only ever wanted to keep you safe. Why? But he couldn't find the words. The cuffs clicked, and she was gone. Ryan stood alone, the pieces of his world around him, jagged and cutting. There was no victory, only ruins, only the truth, raw and merciless. His mother had pulled the trigger, but the bullet had already hit him. He didn't know if he would ever forgive her, but he knew one thing: he would never let the truth be buried again. The police station felt colder than any winter Ryan had ever known. His mother was gone, dragged away in cuffs, her face a canvas of guilt and devastation. The woman who claimed to protect him had betrayed him in ways he couldn't fathom. She took the money. She let Grandma Sophia fight alone. She let her die. But one question still burned in his chest like acid. Why did she stay with Daniel? Why, knowing what he was, did she live under his roof, share his bed, and call it a marriage? What was she protecting? Or who? Ryan was placed in a witness room, his hands still shaking, his throat raw from screaming. An officer entered, but it wasn't the detective from before. It was a woman, sharp-eyed, her expression unreadable. Ryan, she said, her voice steady but heavy. I'm Agent Monroe with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been tracking Horizon Security Group for years. And your mother. His stomach dropped. My mother? The agent set down a folder. You've uncovered something very dangerous, but there are things you don't know, things that may change. Everything. Ryan felt his pulse throb. I know enough. He spat. She sold out my grandmother. She lied to me. She wasn't working for Daniel, Monroe interrupted. She was working against him. The room tilted. That's impossible, he stammered. Monroe opened the folder. Your mother has been an informant for us. She's been feeding us intel on Horizon and Daniel Harper for the last 5 years. His chest tightened, his voice breaking. No, she stayed, Monroe said, her voice low, because she was gathering enough evidence to bring him and his entire operation down. She didn't just marry him, she infiltrated him. Ryan's breath hitched. The room felt like it was crushing him. Then why? Why didn't she stop him from killing my grandmother? Monroe's eyes flicked down. She tried, she said, softer now. But Daniel was 2 steps ahead. He knew she was feeding us scraps of intel. That's why he went after your grandmother without telling her. When she found out, it was too late. Ryan's heart cracked open, every jagged piece cutting from the inside. She told you all this? His voice was barely a whisper. Monroe paused. She didn't need to. We've been listening. We have recordings. Surveillance. She slid him a tablet. You deserve to hear it. His fingers shook as he hit play. A crackled voice, his mother's, whispering over the line, I'll bring him down. Just don't let him hurt Ryan. A pause. Her voice breaking, he killed her. He killed Sophia. I'll never forgive myself. But I can't let him take my son too. The recording ended. But the sound stayed, an echo carved into his bones. His throat closed. She stayed. To protect him. She hated Daniel. She lived in hell. For him. And he slammed the tablet down, his voice ripping from his chest. Why didn't she tell me? Monroe's gaze was heavy. Because she knew. You'd be safest if you hated her. Ryan felt like he couldn't breathe. Every ounce of his rage, his grief, twisted into something he didn't know how to hold. She let me hate her, he rasped, his voice cracking under the weight. To keep me safe. A knock at the door. A second agent entered. Ma'am, we've decrypted the final files from Daniel's server. His face was pale. You need to see this. The tablet refreshed with new footage. Ryan's eyes, raw and burning, fixed on the screen, and then he saw her, not his mother. His grandmother, Sophia. The timestamp, dated 3 days after the termination report. His chest seized. She's alive? He gasped. But the footage wasn't comforting. She was bound, weak, her face bruised. A man's voice, unseen, but familiar, spoke coldly. You should have stayed out of it, Señora, but you had to protect your grandson. And then a second voice, a voice that shattered everything. Don't worry, she won't make it out alive. I'll handle it myself. Ryan froze, because it wasn't Daniel. It was his mother. The tablet slipped from his fingers. His body went cold. Monroe's voice broke the silence, haunted, hollow. I'm sorry, Ryan. It seems there's another layer to this story. The floor vanished beneath him. The world, the truth, collapsed. His mother didn't just infiltrate Daniel. She finished what he started, and he never saw it coming. This isn't over. The darkest part of this story hasn't even begun. The room felt like a tomb. The video, the truth, was a dagger through Ryan's chest. His grandmother, battered and broken, and his mother's voice sealing her fate. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The woman he thought had sacrificed everything for him had taken everything from him. Agent Monroe's voice broke the silence, low and cautious. Ryan, I know this is... No. He cut her off, his voice sharp, shaking, barely human. No more explanations, no more lies. Where is she? Monroe's hesitation was a confirmation. She's being transferred to federal custody, she said carefully. But, Ryan, this isn't... Take me to her, he demanded, his voice like shattered glass. Now, the SUV ride felt endless, the night pressing against the windows as the headlights cut through the darkness. Monroe sat beside him, her expression unreadable. Ryan, she said softly, there's something you should know. She's been silent since her arrest, but when we told her you saw the video, she asked to see you. His chest burned, a wildfire of rage and confusion. Good, he said, his voice cold, hollow. I want her to look at me when she answers. The federal holding facility loomed, a fortress of steel and shadow. The air was thick with the sterile stench of authority. Monroe led him down a corridor that buzzed with the hum of fluorescent lights. "You have 10 minutes, she warned, her voice tight. "We'll be watching." The door opened with a metallic groan. And there she was, his mother. She sat at a metal table, her wrists cuffed, her face pale, lined with exhaustion. But her eyes, those eyes he shared, locked onto his. And in them, he saw something terrifying. Not guilt. Not regret. Resolve. Ryan stepped forward, and the door sealed behind him. The silence stretched, brittle and razor sharp. Finally, he spoke, his voice a barely contained tremor. "Why?" The words sliced through the air like a whip. "Why did you do it?" She inhaled, her voice soft but steady. "Ryan, don't!" He slammed his hands on the table, the metal screaming beneath his palms. "You don't get to say my name like you care. I know. I saw it. His voice cracked into something raw and broken. "You killed her." Her lips pressed together. A flicker of something, pain, crossed her face. "I didn't," she said softly, and the calm in her voice was gasoline on his fire. "Liar," he spat, his body trembling with fury. "I heard you. I saw you. You were there." Her gaze didn't waver, but her voice dropped, low and sharp. "Yes," she said. "I was there, but I didn't kill her. I tried to save her." The world cracked. Save her?" he echoed, his voice a knife edge of disbelief. "Then why the hell did you say you'd handle it?" Her jaw clenched, her hands tightening against the cuffs. "Because," she said, her voice cold and bitter. Daniel was listening. The world spun. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. She leaned forward, her eyes burning. "That wasn't a confession, Ryan. It was a signal. I knew he was recording. I said what he wanted to hear, so he'd think I was loyal. So he'd stop watching, and when he did, I got her out." His heart slammed against his ribs. No, you're lying, am I?" Her voice sharpened. "Then why do you think you never found a body?" His breath fled from his lungs. What are you saying?" She met his eyes, and in them, he saw the only truth that could destroy him more than the lie. "She's alive, Ryan. I hit her." The world collapsed, reformed, and collapsed again. "Alive!" His knees nearly gave. You saved her?" She nodded once, her voice cracking now. "I couldn't stop him from hurting her, but I could stop him from finishing it." Her lips trembled. "I got her out. She's in witness protection. Safe. Her voice broke completely. "I kept you apart to keep her alive." His head spun, his chest heaving. "Why didn't you tell me?" The anguish in his voice was a blade. "You let me hate you. You let me think, because if you knew," she cut in, her voice raw and shaking, "he would have known. He watched you, every move you made, and if he thought you knew, he would have gone after her. He would have killed her." Ryan stumbled back, the world fracturing under the weight of too many truths. "Then why now?" His voice was hoarse. "Why let me see this now?" Her eyes, glassy and burning, met his. "Because," she said, "Daniel's gone. The threat died with him. And because," her voice broke into something shattered and small, "you deserve to know that you didn't lose her. You didn't lose everything." A chasm opened inside him, and he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Rage, relief, sorrow, every piece of him ripped apart and crashing together in a storm he couldn't contain. He felt like a child again, lost, confused, broken. "You should have told me," he whispered, his voice hollow. "You should have trusted me." Her face crumpled. "I know," she choked, "and it cost me you." Tears burned down her cheeks. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But, Ryan, I did it because I couldn't bear to lose you. Even if it meant losing you this way." The air shattered as the guards entered. "Time's up," one said. The cuffs clinked as they hauled her to her feet. She didn't fight, but her eyes, those eyes, stayed locked on his. "Ryan," she whispered. "A plea? A goodbye? 1,000 things at once. Live. For both of us." The door closed, and she was gone. And he stood in the ruins of truth and choice. Between blood and freedom. Between a mother's love and a mother's sin. He didn't know if he would ever forgive her. But he knew one thing. The world thinks this is the end. They're wrong. Because now, he knows the truth. And he decides what happens next. The days after the escape blurred into one long silence. Ryan stayed with his grandmother in a safe house, its walls plain, its windows covered, its air heavy with unspoken grief. She was alive. She was here. And yet, he felt hollow because the one person who had fought for him the hardest, his mother, was gone. He hated her. He loved her. And now, he had lost her before he could decide which mattered more. The flash drive Monroe had died to give him held everything. Proof of Horizon's crimes, his mother's infiltration, Daniel's orders. But no matter how many times he played those recordings, he couldn't escape her voice. Every risk, every lie, every sacrifice made for him. One morning, as the first rays of light crept through the blinds, his grandmother spoke, her voice soft but certain. Your mother, she loved you more than her life. She stayed in the dark so you could find the light. His chest tightened. Then why does it feel like I lost both? His voice cracked, and her hand, warm and worn, closed over his. Because love, she said, is never without pain. That day, Ryan made a choice. He would not let her sacrifice die in silence. He released the final video, the entire truth unedited, every recording, every crime, every cost. And in it, he spoke, not as a victim, but as someone who had learned what love truly means. You followed me through the darkest chapters of my life. You've seen the lies, the betrayal, and the loss. But now, you deserve to know the truth. My mother wasn't my enemy. She was my shield. She was everything Daniel wanted to destroy because she was everything he couldn't control. She stayed in hell to keep me safe, and for so long, I hated her for it. But I understand now. Love isn't perfect. It's messy. It's painful. And sometimes, it looks like betrayal when it's really sacrifice. The video went viral, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered were the comments. People shared their stories about complicated love, about parents they hated and loved in the same breath, about loss, about forgiveness. And Ryan realized family isn't about perfection. It isn't about blood. It's about who stays when the world falls apart. It's about who fights for you, even from the shadows. He still didn't know if he would ever forgive her fully, but he knew he would spend his life honoring what she gave him, a chance to live free. So, this is where he leaves them. But before he goes, what does family mean to you? Is it blood or is it love? If this story has moved you, if it's made you feel anything, please like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this aren't just his, they're ours. And sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that bring us closer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing him. See you in the next chapter.